And I'm joined this week by our editor and foreign policy writer, Tom Rogan. And Tom, you did a piece this week for the magazine looking at a new cartel, or maybe not so new, but newly powerful cartel rising in Mexico. And there's a lot of talk about sort of not NGOs, but non-government entities that are threatening weaker central governments. What's going on in Mexico, and why should we be concerned about it?
So thanks for having me on, Jim. So the real thrust of my piece was about this cartel called the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, which is the ascendant powerful cartel in Mexico that has, through a mixture of very clever financial operations, money laundering, very aggressive military operations or terrorist type operations, assassinations of police officers, bribes of politicians, the familiar type cartel activity, has been assuming much greater power inside Mexico, both against rival cartels such as the Sinaloa cartel, which El Chapo Guzman, who some of your viewers might be aware of, who's now in an American prison, used to be the really powerful cartel. Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or CJNG as they're known by acronym, has both taken power in terms of its own efforts, but has also formed a allegiance with one of El Chapo's sons to try and, who is obviously Sinaloa cartel as well, to try and sort of take advantage of a civil war in the Sinaloa cartel. I think the operative point, though, is that as Mexico deals with President Trump and President Trump's interest in terms of bolstering efforts to reduce various drugs being smuggled into the United States, the leverage both militarily and politically through bribes, extortion, etc., that this cartel has on the Mexican government, President Sheinbaum, is increasingly significant. And so, as you suggested at the opening, there is this growing concern, I think, about the displacement of sovereign power by a non-state actor that is just extraordinarily powerful and has the means to say to a lot of, whether you're a police officer, judge, school teacher, whatever it might be, across the business person, do you want to run the risk of this person down the street who got assassinated 2 days ago because 3 days ago they said something negative about us? Or do you want to take a big bribe? And so there's that real undercurrent of instability.
So obviously there's been a lot of progress made in terms of reducing illegal entries of human beings from the border, but the Trump administration hasn't seemed very happy or at least satisfied yet with the reduction in the flow of drugs.
Yes, and we are seeing, I think, growing steps by the administration, especially sort of CIA covert action to generate more intelligence, potentially for the Mexicans to go after cartel leaders. I think there is disappointment in the administration that the Mexican authorities have not done that so much, which I think is both a function of corruption, but also concern that if you go after some of these kingpins, as has happened previously, they're going to start committing, the group, that the kingpins belong to are going to start, committing more terrorist attacks, assassinations, etc., and creating real violent instability inside Mexico. But President Trump seems pretty insistent that he's going to push this agenda. And I think one of the things we have to be aware of in the United States is these cartels have made a vast amount of money to the level of almost state level, power of nation states, that they are going to be reticent to yield to escalating even American military or, CIA drone strike type assassination pressure. And that if they feel the US is pushing, the potential for them then to, kidnap American college students in Cancun or attack a cruise ship that is visiting a Mexican port or, do something even inside the United States will grow in tandem. And so at that point, you get into a kind of situation feasibly where you are dealing with terrorism against Americans, because, again, these groups have a lot to lose. And as they would see it, hopefully, at that critical point, they might judge that it's worth rolling the dice with escalation in terms of the United States, because then Trump might decide, well, this is getting a bit too much. And that they have such structural power in Mexico, the only thing you could really do is invade Mexico. And I don't think there's much appetite for that.
Sure. So if they're at a point where there's a realistic threat of terrorism within the United States, then surely they must also pose a threat to the Mexican government's sovereignty, no?
Exactly. And clearly they have calculated it up until this point. It is not in their interest to directly go after Americans, because I think they think the US action is relatively, it's not hurting them too much, right? But if that was to change, the risk would change. Clearly, though, if they have that leverage ability already inside Mexico, and the level of assassinations that this group has been linked to, very, very senior people, a level of corruption to people right up to the former President Obrador's brother has been linked in a recent investigation. This is an extremely powerful entity within inside the Mexican state that sort of exists as a kind of parasite on the shoulder of the Mexican state, and thus one might be able to argue is almost becoming the Mexican state.
The cartels and corruption have been a problem in Mexico for quite a while. Is this situation worse, or is it worsening, perhaps?
I think it's worse in the sense that the financial capital and power that this group has in terms of absorbing other cartels, becoming the preeminent cartel that really controls the levers of power, both in terms of the drug export market, but also the proximity to power in the Mexican state that covers, is sort of increasingly unprecedented. Looking back, I think the better example might be what happened in Colombia with Pablo Escobar, that you're seeing a situation that developed where actually the state itself becomes subordinated to the cartel.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks.
If you're watching us on YouTube, you can read Tom's full story by clicking here on our digital magazine.